We begin the narrative in northeast England, where we see a truck loaded with sheep stop to let out two young Americans who hitchhiked a ride. Their names are David Kessler and Jack Goodman. The driver reminds them to stick to the roads and not venture off the beaten paths before he leaves, and the duo then starts to cross the Yorkshire moors. This journey is part of a 3-month trip that will later take them to Italy, where Jack is hopeful to find the girl he has liked since 8th grade. As night begins to fall, the friends decide to stop in a small town to rest a bit and for something more, which is dinner. They find a peculiar pub called the Slaughtered Lamb, which has a disturbing sign displaying a bleeding wolf's head, but they decide to go in anyway. Everyone inside the place instantly falls into complete silence and does not resume talking until the boys place their orders appropriately. While they wait, Jack observes something painted on the wall, which is a 5-pointed star, commonly used in witchcraft as a representation of the werewolf. He asks why they have that pentagram there, causing everyone in the pub to become instantly hostile and ultimately expel the friends, just as a storm begins to form outside. The barmaid disagrees. She thinks it isn't right to let them go like that, but the men don't let her speak. Once again, they tell David and Jack to leave, reminding them to stay on the roads while being careful of the moon. After the duo exits, the men discuss the matter again, considering that they probably sent the boys to their deaths. But what's done is done. Telling them the truth would have been a bad idea, as the boys wouldn't have believed them anyway. When the howl of a wolf begins to echo in the area, the barmaid asks the men to go find the boys, but they simply pretend they didn't hear anything. Meanwhile, David and Jack accidentally wander off the road while playing in the rain. They start to hear the wolf howling too and try to turn back, but they realize they are completely lost, so they try to run in the opposite direction of the noises they hear. However, David ends up tripping and falling, giving the wolf creature enough time to catch up to them. Unfortunately, the beast lunges at Jack and kills him. It then goes after David, but only manages to scratch and bite him once before the pub men arrive and manage to kill it. Before passing out, David notices a nude man on the ground, bleeding from multiple gunshot wounds. 3 weeks later, David finds himself in a hospital in London, being treated by Dr. Hirsch and Nurse Alex Price, who are discussing his case while he remains unconscious. The police report stated that he was supposedly attacked by a lunatic fugitive. After dreaming that he was running through the forest, David finally wakes up and finds the doctor and an American embassy staff member, who tell him that his family and Jack's have already been informed about what happened. He begins to panic upon hearing that Jack is dead, so the nurse gives him a sedative. But before he passes out again, he clarifies that he was not attacked by a lunatic, but by a creature resembling a ferocious wolf. A few hours later, 2 detectives from Scotland Yard come to ask David some questions, but they do not believe him when he says that he was attacked by a werewolf. The police autopsy report in Yorkshire and the witness statements say it was a man, so they think David is probably hallucinating due to the concussion unless he truly believes he can prove some kind of monstrous conspiracy. David doesn't understand how there could be witnesses, and Dr. Hirsch blames it on memory problems, but David insists that his memory is just fine. It is his sanity that he starts to doubt. Later, David dreams again that he is running through the forest. This time he can see himself naked and jumping over some wild animals to eat them. When lunch is brought to him, he is not hungry and refuses to eat. Nurse Alex cannot give him his pills if he has an empty stomach, so she starts to force feed him, a gesture that David finds affectionate and welcoming. When David falls asleep again, another nightmare comes. This time he is running through the forest in his travel clothes and sees himself in the hospital bed making a monster face at Alex when she comes to check on him. When he wakes up, he tells Dr. Hirsch that his dreams have never been so vivid and real, but the doctor just checks his wounds to see if they are healing properly and blames the nightmares on the traumatic experience. David doesn't want to be alone, so Dr. Hirsch agrees to send someone to keep him company during the night. At night, Alex comes to stay with him, and when David falls asleep, he begins to have another nightmare. This time he is at home and has to watch as monster soldiers kill everyone before setting the house on fire. As soon as he wakes up, he tells Alex about it, but a monster soldier breaks the window and kills her too. It is morning when David truly wakes up. This time he prepares to have his breakfast, but suddenly sees something quite shocking. The ghost of Jack is in the room, displaying the scars that the wolf left on him. After telling David about all the people who attended his funeral, Jack delivers the message he came to share. They were attacked by a werewolf, and both have been cursed for that reason. Jack will wander the earth in limbo until the curse is finally lifted, and David will turn into a werewolf when the full moon arrives in 2 days. If he wants to avoid killing innocents and save Jack, then David must die. This news leaves David quite shaken, and he refuses to listen to Jack any longer, so he calls for the nurse. But when Alex arrives, Jack is already gone. David kisses Alex before telling her that he is a werewolf and that the ghost of his best friend visited him. But Alex thinks he is dreaming again, so David accepts this explanation. Days later, David is healthy enough and discharged from the hospital. Alex invites him to stay at her apartment, so they go there after stopping to do some shopping. After Alex shows David around the place, the two end up sharing the shower and the bed during the night. Once finished, and with Alex asleep, David goes to the bathroom and finds Jack's ghost again, this time looking like he has started to rot even more. After teasing David for having a nurse girlfriend, Jack reminds him once again that he needs to die before he ends up killing someone. David tries to convince himself that this is not real, and Jack disappears. When Alex wakes up and comes to him after hearing voices, she hears David venting his concerns, especially when he says that in old movies only a werewolf's loved one could kill him. Alex comforts him and tells him that this is just his guilt talking. He probably just feels bad because he couldn't save Jack. The next day, Dr. Hirsch drives to Yorkshire to visit the slaughtered lamb and check David's story. Everyone in the pub pretends they don't know what he is talking about when he starts asking questions. And when Hirsch notices the star on the wall, they merely tell him it was there when they took over the place and left it as traditional decoration. Seeing that he won't find answers there, Hirsch decides to leave, but on his way to his car, he encounters a man waiting for him. This man warns him that David and the people around him are in danger, but before he can say more, a man from the pub comes out and makes him drop the subject. Back in London, Alex is leaving for work, so David goes out to give her a goodbye kiss. Now he accidentally locked himself out of the house, so he has to go around and climb through the window. While trying to do so, a dog and a cat pass by, and both animals react quite hostile to his presence. As soon as he gets back inside, David checks his teeth and growls at the mirror, but notices nothing strange. He then tries to keep himself busy with various activities like watching TV, eating, and reading, but continues to feel bored. However, when night falls, things become less boring. David starts screaming when he suddenly feels his body burning and takes off his clothes before he begins to transform into a werewolf under the full moonlight. He then escapes from home, eager to find prey. His first victims are a couple visiting some friends for dinner. David catches them in the garden and kills them right there. Hearing the noises outside, the homeowner goes to check and finds the bodies right after the wolf leaves. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Hirsch is worried about David, so he has Alex call home to check on him. When no one answers, Hirsch decides to tell Alex what he discovered in Yorkshire. The case was closed, they misplaced the file, and David's wounds were treated before he arrived at the hospital. And yet no doctor had seen him, which means the whole community is hiding what happened there. Hirsch believes it is mass hysteria, and if everyone in that town believes it was a werewolf, then obviously David's mind, after going through trauma, would believe it as well. Hirsch thinks David will go out in a frenzy and hurt others while he thinks he is a monster, so he decides to call the police, even when Alex points out that what David needs is psychiatric help. But back to David, he is still out there looking for more prey. He stops near the river to kill a group of homeless people and then enters the subway station to attack a man trying to flee from him, but ends up tripping down the stairs, giving him the perfect opportunity to strike. The next morning, David wakes up completely naked inside the wolf cage at the zoo with no memory of what happened. The wolves seem unconcerned with him, so he easily escapes the cage and hides, concealing himself in bushes and behind walls. First, he steals some balloons from a child to cover himself and run more easily. Then, he takes the coat of a woman who is sitting on a bench. After putting it on, he takes the bus back home, receiving many strange looks along the way. In the meantime, Dr. Hirsch calls Alex to see if she has news about David. Since she hasn't seen him yet, Hirsch goes to get the newspaper that published an article about all the deaths from the night before. When David finally gets home, Alex is relieved to see him, but does not notice anything strange except for his story about waking up at the zoo. When Dr. Hirsch calls again to check on him, Alex tells him that David is confused and excited, but far from crazy. In fact, he seems quite lucid. Hirsch decides not to tell her about the news and asks her to take David to the hospital so that he can be under his supervision. The couple decides to take a taxi to the hospital, and while trying to make some trivial conversation, the driver comments on the deaths, pointing out that all the victims were mutilated. David immediately deduces that it was his fault and makes the driver stop the car so he can get out and find a police officer. Alex doesn't want him to turn himself in because she thinks he doesn't belong in prison. He just needs help, but David doesn't listen to her. He finds a cop and tells him he killed those people last night. But as the officer doesn't do anything, David starts insulting the cop and the royal family, trying to get himself arrested. The officer just thinks David is a lunatic and leaves him with Alex, then walks away, telling all the bystanders to do the same. Suddenly, David tells Alex that he loves her and kisses her before running away, because she shouldn't be near him now that he considers himself dangerous. Back at the hospital, Hirsch is visited again by the detectives, who admit that the lab report believes the killer was some kind of animal. They promised they would find David, but refused to accept that he could be connected to the murders. Meanwhile, David calls his family to tell them he loves them, and then tries to use a knife to end it all, but cannot convince himself to do it. As he contemplates his next move, he encounters Jack's ghost, even more decayed, outside an adult cinema, asking him to follow him inside. David does so and finds Jack sitting at the back of the theater, ready to say he had warned him, before introducing him to some new ghostly friends. All the ghosts of David's victims appear around them, and together with Jack, they begin to offer ideas on how to end it all more effectively than with a knife. Unfortunately, they cannot agree on a method before the full moon appears, and David begins to transform again. The other viewers quickly become victims of his attack, and when the usher enters to check the noise, he also dies. A crowd begins to form around the cinema entrance when the attendant starts to scream for help, and soon the police arrive to assist as well. An officer enters the building and finds the werewolf feeding on the body, then quickly runs out and asks other officers to help him close the doors. More officers arrive to help, including the detectives, but no matter how many of them hold the doors, David is too strong to be contained. The werewolf breaks down the door and kills the detective before escaping, causing a huge car crash in the middle of the street. At the hospital, Hirsch hears about this incident and tells Alex, who runs out to try to help David. Bravely, she finds him and dodges the police officers who have surrounded the werewolf inside an alley. Still believing she can appeal to David's conscience, Alex approaches the werewolf, offers her help, and tells him that she loves him. However, this is not enough. David growls at her, and the police shoot him before he can attack. Alex watches in shock as the werewolf returns to his human form and then dies on the floor.